As most of you are no doubt aware, there's a new Don't Starve Together beta out, and it's got some pretty cool new skill trees for 2 characters, as well as much needed ocean content. Starting off, Wigfrid is one of the 2 characters who got a new skill tree. The Headliner branch is rather interesting, since it requires you to do certain tasks to unlock their respective item or skill. Fighting Word changes the battle stingers, the ones that draw aggro and cause fear, to change from draining inspiration to being on a cooldown of 30 seconds. This is unlocked by using a stinger 10 times. The Battle Call Canister is a mobile chest specifically for your songs, and it's unlocked by having 6 songs in your inventory at one time. Encore allows you to revive nearby players by using Wigfrid's inspiration. There's currently no limit on the number of allies that you can bring back, which is pretty nice. This is unlocked by playing a Beefalo horn. I'll say it though, the Headliner branch is kinda not great. Unfortunately, the best one is the Battle Call Canister and the Encore, since being able to play a song to revive all nearby players is really useful, especially since it doesn't cause a max health penalty, though the times you'd actually use this as intended, that being mid-fight, is probably going to be pretty low. The Battle Canister would be fine if it didn't take up a skill point. It's just kind of a niche option for the most part. And the fact that you can't use the songs from the canister itself, like you can with Maxwell and reading his Codex Umbra, kind of makes it annoying to use. Mystic Resilience is something I'm just going to lump in here because it's just kind of out in its own area. And it just gives you +5 planar damage resistance, which is pretty alright at later stages of the game. It's just kind of meant to compound with Wigfrid's damage absorption. Her Arsenal category is where some of her more interesting perks are at. With Braggy's Blessing 1 and 2, it increases the rate at which you gain inspiration while you're in combat, specifically while you're using the Battle Spear. The Lightning Spear allows Wigfrid to craft, well, the Lightning Spear, which does electric damage on top of its 59 base damage. Lightning Spear Enhancement 1 allows the Lightning Spear to perform a special attack, and if you hit an enemy with the special attack, it'll repair the spear's durability. Lightning Spear Enhancement 2 allows the spear to be upgraded using Restrained Static, and it'll deal +20 planar damage. Hard Helm 1 and 2 makes Battle Helms even more durable when they're equipped by Wigfrid. Commander's Helm is basically just an upgrade to the Wigfrid Helm, and it protects against knockback and has higher durability. Commander's Helm Enhancement 1 adds planar damage protection to the Commander's Helm, and Commander's Helm Enhancement 2 allows Wigfrid's health regen to repair the Commander Helm, but only while Wigfrid is at max HP. The Battle Rod allows Wigfrid to craft a shield which can be used to attack, block attacks, and provides armor while it's equipped. Battle Rod Enhancement 1 enhances the Battle Rod's protection ability, and Battle Rod Enhancement 2, after blocking a hit with the Battle Rod, will allow you to deal +10 damage on your next attack. The Rider category is all about Beefalo and Beefalo accessories. Noble Mount 1 allows Beefalo to get domesticated 15% faster. Noble Mount 2 allows you to ride Beefalos for 30% longer. And Noble Mount 3 gives +10 planar damage to Beefalo. Lastly, the Battle Saddle unlocks a new Beefalo saddle that grants +40% damage reduction to your Beefalo. I have a lot to say about this category in particular, starting off with why. Like, I appreciate being able to tame a Beefalo better, but why is it as Wigfrid? Like, Beefalo are very strong, sure, but Wigfrid's perks don't really apply to the Beefalo, so she doesn't get as much benefit from it as a character like, say, Maxwell would. You know, Beefalo don't get lifesteal when Wigfrid is riding them, they don't get the damage absorption bonus, and they don't get probably the most important thing, the +25% damage boost. So why is the ability to tame them better on Wigfrid of all characters? This kind of feels like Wigfrid is supposed to tame Beefalo, but for other characters to use, which is like, why wouldn't those characters just have the skills instead? You know, I don't know. The easy solution is to have Wigfrid's perks apply to the Beefalo when she's riding it, but currently that's not a perk that she has. You know, hopefully this gets changed though. Lastly is the standard affinity perks. Shadow Cantus allows you to craft a song that causes allies to take less damage from shadow-aligned enemies and deal more damage to lunar-aligned enemies. While the Lunar Melodist allows you to craft a song that causes allies to take less damage from lunar-aligned enemies, deal more damage to shadow-aligned enemies. As far as affinity skills go, yeah, this is pretty standard. I can see this being useful against some bosses like Celestial Champion, Fuel Weaver, along with the new strain of bosses in Lunar Deerclops and things like that. But as far as day-to-day goes, these songs probably aren't going to see much use just because Wigfrid would need inspiration to activate it, and by the time she gets enough inspiration, most of the time the nightmare creatures, or whatever it is that you're fighting, would probably be dead if they're not bosses, even if they are spawned by other characters. Overall, I think Wigfrid kinda got a mess of skills, if I'm being honest. I think the spear and the battle helm are pretty interesting ones, and definitely are her best, but the ability to turn stingers into things that are on cooldown are kind of whatever. The canister is meant to ease the inventory issue of the songs, but like, you really only hold on to a small handful of songs depending on the boss fights anyways, and you typically don't use them outside of that. Though with the Lightning Spear's new AoE effect, that might change since it's easier to stock up on a lot of inspiration if you're farming smaller mobs. The rider skills are pretty weird, you know, like I mentioned before, they feel like they belong on a character that isn't Wigfrid. You know, since her perks don't really provide anything for the Beefalo other than, you know, now the ability to make them armor. Hopefully Clay changes the rider category to include Wigfrid's perks applying to Beefalo, since otherwise it feels like you're just missing out on character perks by taming them. Next up is Willow's skill tree, who definitely got the long end of the stick on this one. Willow's lighter, or more aptly put, her fire perks, all revolve around fire and her ability to control and use them. Controlled burning makes it so that fires you set don't spread, and if an enemy dies while it's on fire, its loot won't burn, but it'll drop as smoldering. Items like torches and Willow's lighter are also guaranteed to set enemies on fire when you have this skill. Burn duration causes enemies to burn for longer. Firefighter makes enemies take more damage from fire over time. Brighter Lighter 1 and 2 increase the light radius of the lighter, making it comparable to that of a lantern. And Hungry Lighter stops things from burning by absorbing the flames with your lighter. Last but certainly not least is things that revolve around a new mechanic called Ember. Starting off with Ember Tender, which allows Willow to cast Pyrokinesis with the use of embers. The way that you get embers are they're dropped when an enemy that is on fire dies near you, and then you just have to suck it up with the Hungry Lighter perk. Spontaneous Combustion is an AoE fire burst around Willow that sets enemies on fire. Fireball is basically just the Starcaller Staff's star, and Burning Frenzy applies a buff to Willow where, for 30 seconds, she gets a plus 25% weapon damage boost while you're attacking an enemy that is on fire. These skills are crazy strong. Even just her Fireball is an amazing perk to have since it's just a Starcaller on demand. The only catch is that her perks function the same way as Wartox's do, with her needing to farm enemies in order to actually use these perks. The biggest difference between Willow collecting Kindling versus Wartox collecting Souls is that Willow has a way to farm them in her kit, with Willow's Spontaneous Combustion being pretty strong due to her just setting everything within an AoE on fire, opening up the door to easily mass things like bees, spiders, and even more. Her boost in damage over time is very nice since at worst, it's passive damage, and at best, it's passive damage stacked on top of a damage modifier. Not to mention that Willow has a day 1 access to a Starcaller Staff. You know, that item that everybody uses towards late game all the time for everything. So yeah, that's pretty good. Bernie also has his own category too, with, in my opinion, some more lacking buffs. Patch Up 1 and 2 causes Bernie to regen HP slowly. Barely Sane 1 and 2 lowers the insanity threshold required for Bernie to get big. And Accelerant 1 and 2 causes Bernie to move faster. Hot-Headed makes it so that Bernie aggroes Shadow and Lunar aligned enemies passively. Tough Stuffing increases Bernie's max health. And Burning Bernie requires 8 points into the Bernie skills, and allows you to set Bernie on fire, which applies Thorns damage to him. So if an enemy attacks Bernie, then they'll get hit by the fire damage in turn. You know, I'll say it. This line is mostly kinda underwhelming. Like, yeah, Bernie is already good, but at the same time, this doesn't really make him better in the ways that you can use him. Previously, Bernie was a really strong tool in the hands of Willow and a moderately good one in the hands of everyone else. So what you would expect is for more options in how Bernie functions for Willow. So that way, the difference in quality between Willow and everyone else using it is made even greater, but that really isn't the case. The biggest issue is that this doesn't really add anything to Bernie. You can still use Bernie the same exact way as you could previously, and honestly, Zeds don't really help enhance it all too much. You could say that Bernie having more HP or regenning more HP is a pretty big buff, but at the same time, Bernie isn't just a one-item guy. You can make multiple Bernies, so if one dies, you could just drop another one. Making it so that if you invest in his HP regen and his tough stuffing, then all of a sudden it's just how much time until you have to drop a second Bernie, or how much time until you have to pick him up and then repair him again. You know, like, those two are just replaced by having more Burnies, is the biggest issue that I have. The affinity perks are also rather interesting, with Shadow and Lunar Burnie applying planar damage to Burnie in both forms, and planar damage resistance. The only difference is that Shadow Burnie is particularly strong against Lunar aligned mobs, while Lunar Burnie is particularly strong against Shadow aligned mobs. Shadow Fire Razor and Lunar Fire Razor are Willow's fire-related affinity perks, with the Shadow Fire Razor using embers to shoot 5 tendrils of black flames in all directions that eventually home in on enemies. While the Lunar Fire Razor uses embers to blast lunar flames, similar to a Lunar Varg's Fire Breath. For the Fire Razor perks, the Shadow one is just kind of bad. You know, unfortunately, the Shadow one's homing is pretty finicky, causing most of the hits to miss, and the shots don't have piercing at this point in time, so they hit one target on impact for 100 damage, and nothing else. While the Lunar Fire Razor, on the other hand, is insanely strong. Just letting Willow rip a Fire Blast in front of her that deals damage constantly, pierces, and Willow can move while casting it, albeit a lot slower. But it's just significantly better than the Shadow one in most every way, shape, and form. The easy remedy to kind of balance these out is just to apply piercing to the Shadow Fire Razor and make it latch onto other enemies after it hits the initial one. So the idea is that each tendril will hit one enemy, and then those tendrils will move on to the next enemy, but they won't loop back around to it. Overall, Willow mains can rejoice because the biggest complaint I've seen of hers is now basically resolved. She's actually a fire-based character, because prior to this, Willow was just kind of a Burnie factory with some small things here and there that had like a little bit of emphasis on fire, which kind of did help her stay at a pretty alright / decent character range. I still stand by my previous statements on Willow, by the way. I still think that, you know, at the time she was underrated. But now Willow has a lot going for her. Being able to choose to become the fire starter she was always meant to be, or double down on making Burnie the best tank that he could possibly be. Now last, but certainly not least, is the Shark Boy, the Frostjaw. We got a new boss on the ocean in a rather interesting platform in the middle of it. The Frostjaw is spawned from finding this ice platform in the ocean, and its fight is initiated by fishing in the ice hole. You know, I feel like there's an actual term for whatever the actual, you know, ice hole is called for when someone does go ice fishing. But for now, let's just say ice hole. The ice hole fishing doesn't require bait or a bobber. You just have to fish it a couple times using a sea fishing rod, and you'll eventually reel in a Frostjaw. At the time of my recording this, the mechanics behind it aren't completely fleshed out, but according to some data mining, you know, some data miners, people poking around in the files, the Frostjaw is going to stick around for a bit, and it has some mechanics that imply that it could help you out, specifically in the form of dialogue. It's a really interesting and cool mechanic from everything that we're seeing of it, and the fight itself is very unique and adds a way to get tons of ice throughout the year. You know, it's pretty good. I really like this fight. The boss drops one new item, the Bootleg Transporter, which lets you traverse the ocean almost instantly. This item is pretty alright. Like, in concept, this item cuts down on travel by tons, but in practice, the Frostjaw only really drops 2, so if you want to use them over and over again, then you have to farm the Frostjaw, which is on a pretty lengthy cooldown, which isn't great. The fact that you can only traverse the ocean, and only the ocean that you've explored, also doesn't really help out. I'm still holding out hope on how they update the boss, because, you know, there's still a lot of directions that they can go from here. But yeah, that's the update. It's really cool. I'm really liking the direction that the skill trees are going. I definitely think that this is one of the best ones as of late, which, you know, I'm probably going to say that about every single skill tree update if I'm being honest, but this one's genuinely really good. I can't really complain about the update. I do think all of the notes that I said are a bit justifiable. You know, I still think that the Beefalo Rider skill is kind of weird. I think that Burnie's side of the skill tree for Willow kind of needs a buff. I think that Wigfrid's definitely does need a buff, you know, if I'm being honest. But this is all still in the beta, so hopefully they can still change everything, and hopefully they do. But let me know if you guys think that they should trade these, you know, if they let me know if you guys think this is all justified, or if I'm just like, you know, losing my gourd, I don't know. But that's all I really wanted to talk about, so until next time, bye-bye.